When I first started out in graduate school in philosophy and so on, I was very interested in Hegel. But at this point, Hegel was really persona non grata in Anglophone philosophy in Australia, Britain, Canada, the United States. There were, of course, always a few people who taught Hegel here and there and so on, but by and large, he was just regarded as a dead end. In fact, even worse than a dead end, a real pariah, the kind of person who really just shouldn't be read. One of these kind of embarrassing moments in the history of philosophy that we really would do best just to forget about here. In those days, when I was, just like I said, a young assistant professor out of graduate school, and I'd meet people at, say, conferences, and they would ask me, what do you work on? And I'd say, well, one of the things I'm working on is Hegel. I would get what I always called that, the look, which was as if you had just said, I'm trying to work out, the logic and metaphysics of P.T. Barnum or something like that. It's kind of, you can't really be serious about what you're doing here. That, of course, has changed an awful lot in the intervening years and so on. Hegel is now back in the forefront of things and so on. There's a way in which, of course, Hegel never really went away during this period. Hegel has always been a major figure in non-Anglophone philosophy, for example. Not merely continental European philosophy, but Chinese philosophy, and of course during the Soviet Union, because of the relation to Marx, right, he was also considered to be a major figure and so on. But it also in the really in the 50s and 60s too, there was a large movement in Germany. I would think of professors such as Klaus Hartmann, or Dieter Henrich, or Hans Friedrich Fulda, or Michael Teunissen, and a whole variety of others. Right, like you can continue the list, who are really looking at how Hegel really was fitting into this kind of post-Kantian tradition. How Hegel was, should be taken, in fact, as a serious thinker, as a thinker who has in no sense been outmoded by contemporary thought, but still has something valuable to contribute, or if nothing else, just something that is worth looking at on its own because of its intrinsic interest as part of the history of philosophy here. It's, of course, true that there were always people in the Anglophone world who dealt with Hegel, but they tended not to be in philosophy departments. So, for example, in government departments, there was a lot of interest in Hegel, the political theorist. Judith Shklar, at the time, wrote a very interesting book on Hegel and phenomenology and the struggles of mastery and servitude and what role that could play in political theory. People like Lionel Trilling put Hegel to great use in talking about literature and things like this. But still, you had to look around quite a bit to find someone who was actually teaching courses in Hegel, and much less anyone who was willing to encourage, say, graduate work in Hegel. That all began to change with people like Walter Kaufmann, here, the historian of philosophy, John Finley, who wrote a book on Hegel in the 60s, and then, of course, Charles Taylor's major book in 1975, when he was still a professor at Oxford, right, that really changed a lot of the kind of Anglophone views about Hegel and so on. And then it's really not really until you might say the late 80s and the 90s, really, that Hegel began to have this kind of renaissance in American philosophy here.